Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You have reached the No Name Cinema Society, the award-nominated film review show that digs a little deeper. It is Monday, May 13th, 2019, and this is our Sound Off, our Freeform segment. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler. I'm one of your hosts. I'm here in LA with my buddy Bogey. I got a couple other hosts with me that I'll introduce you to shortly. And so, yes, the Sound Off. It's our Freeform segment. When the show was initially devised, Davey had this sense. He wanted something that was a little more conversational, a little more freeform in nature. So the Sound Off was born, and it's a little less structured where we do individual reviews. It's more of a catch-all, where we maybe rediscuss a show or a review that one of us, a movie that came out of a conversation that one of us hadn't seen. We're going to do that tonight, or answer your questions on Twitter. A little more laid back. And tonight's the first Sound Off every new year sort of deals with the finale episode, sort of picking up where we left off from some of the finale episodes. And so first, one of my partners from the Top 10 and the 1942 in review, ladies and gentlemen, George Pappas is here.
Hey there, everybody. Thanks, JB.
Thank you for coming on. And also one of my partners from the 1988 review is here, Alex Evans.
Hello from below the line.
You are, exactly, you are outdoors. This is a first. Are you going to be able to hear us outside? You got your headphones in.
I do, yeah. So long as you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. All right, this is trailblazing an outdoor broadcast here for one of the shows. So our schedule for this set of episodes, we do 4 episodes in every set. It started on Thursday, May 2nd, with a review of the current film Avengers Endgame. And then we did the Indie Spotlight on Monday, May 6th, which was Tom Ford's A Single Man from 2009. And our classic this set of episodes was The Last Temptation of Christ this past Thursday, May 9th. And tonight is our Sound Off. And there you see some of the things we're going to be doing tonight. You guys ready to jump into the Sound Off? You've both done Sound Offs before. Every Sound Off, we do a little fun thing called This Day in History. And that's our first segment to start off the evening. On this day in history, May 13th, 1958, Stan Musial of the St. Louis Cardinals gets his landmark 3,000 hit. He became only the 8th player in history to do so, and he held the National League record for hits until Pete Rose broke that record in 1981. Speaking of 1981, on that day, and on May 13th in that year, Pope John Paul II was shot and critically wounded in the Vatican City. And this is a complicated story. A Turkish man by the name of Mehmet Ali Agca, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it, but he did shoot the Pope. Following his arrest and the Pope's survival, he and the Pope would become friends after the Pope visited him in prison a few times. He was forgiven by the Pope and pardoned by the Italian president at the Pope's request. He was deported back to Turkey, where he was put right back in prison for a murder he committed in 1979. He has told several different stories as to the motivations for the attempt on the Pope's life. He was definitely part of a planned attempt. Other conspirators have been identified and confirmed, but it is unclear who sent them. Some say Russians, others say Bulgarian mafia, others say Turkish activists. Agca has not confirmed or denied any of these, but the Russian plot seems to be the most accepted by a small margin. On this day in history in 2004, May 13, 2004, the final episode of Frasier airs. It was watched by 33 million people on NBC. During its 11-year run, Frasier won 37 Emmys, the most ever for a sitcom and third most ever for any show behind Saturday Night Live and Game of Thrones, including 5 consecutive wins for Outstanding Comedy of the Year. In terms of birthdays today is the 33rd birthday of one Robert Pattinson. Most of you know him for Twilight, or he was in the 4th Harry Potter film. James Monaghan named him Best Actor of 2017 for his work in Good Time. And I liked him in a film called Childhood of a Leader. So Robert Pattinson turns 33 today. Still very young and a career ahead of him. Alex, anything on May 13th, this day in history?
No, not to my recollection.
I thought maybe you might have something about the Pope shooting. That seems up your alley.
Well, as the descendant of Polish Catholics, my family are fans of the man.
Okay. George, you remember the Pope shooting?
Sure I do. Of course I do.
Were you into it?
Not even remotely. It was kind of horrifying, but what can I tell you? And it was not long after the attempted assassination of Reagan.
All right, our next segment is going to be, I actually genuinely don't exactly know. It's Tweet Beat. All right. We get a lot of the same questions year to year about the finale episodes that we do, our top 10 of 2018, our Oscar preview, and of course our 1988 in review. Are you guys ready for Tweet Beat? Answer some fans' questions?
Okay.
All right. First question that comes up is, we did our top 10. James, George, and I do the top 10. So I always release what's called a composite top 10. That's what you can see in front of you now. If you added all our films together, the 30 films, or we had some crossovers, so maybe less than 30 films. If you added those in, assign them points, this would what the top 10 would look like if you had a composite top 10 of all our top 10s. My number one film of the year tops the composite list for the first time ever. This is the fourth time we've done this. We have 4 Best Picture nominees and a Best Director nominee in this composite top 10. And 2 animated films make the composite top 10. If we counted Jim and Ryan's lists, and they did the Oscar preview, Black Klansman and Spider-Man would both climb up the list. Since doing the top 10, James has seen Minding the Gap and said that it would have made his top 10 had he seen it in time. And so that would have climbed up the list as well. Based on the shows that we did, the top 10 of 2018, this is the composite list. George, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a little confused about something. Cold War is on here at number 7. My memory of that was that I was the only one of the 3 of us that put Cold War.
Right, but because it was your number 2, it got 9 points.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Alex, any thoughts on this list?
Is this based on the voting we did around the Oscars?
No, George, James, and I did our top 10s. If you combined our top 10s, this is what it would look like.
Oh, okay. I enjoyed some of these movies. I didn't see about half of them.
Okay, Widows was my number 1, and it was James's number 5 or 6. And so that pushed it to the top because it was high on both our lists.
I saw Black Panther, Into the Spider-Verse, Black Klansman, and The Favorite. So I saw 4 of them.
Okay.
If I was just putting those 4 in order, this is the order I'd put them in.
I guess that's something.
I don't know what else to give you.
We'll talk to Alex later about his favorite films of 2018 because he only opined about 1988. One fan posed something interesting to me that hadn't occurred to me before. Now that we've done 4 sets of top 10, what would a composite of the composites look like? And so that's the next thing. We started doing top 10s in 2015. So if we added all our top 10s together between 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018, it would look like this. Turned out to be a pretty interesting list. Phantom Thread at number 1 is the only film in our history to make all 3 of our list in that particular year, which was 2017. And that's why it is very easily number 1. Widows is the only one of my number 1 films to make this list. On this list, there are 2 Best Picture winners and 5 Best Picture nominees. 4 of these 10 films are from 2015, which is the first year that we did that. Each other year, 2016, 2017, and 2018, are all represented twice. I hate one of the films on this list and dislike 2 of the others, just so you guys know that this is not a list of my favorite films. This truly does represent taste of the group in general. Silence, Creed, and Widows were only seen by 2 of the 3 members of the panel, so theoretically they could have been higher if other people had seen them.
Is this the Silence, the Scorsese film in Japan?
It is the Scorsese film in Japan, yes.
Okay.
It was Davey's number 1 film of that year and my number 2.
It seems like a film somebody who wants people to think they're a film buff and really smart would select as their favorite, as opposed to it being an enjoyable ride on its own.
I loved it. We just did Last Temptation of Christ a few days ago, and I referred to it, saying that it's actually a stronger meditation on faith for me. I think it's a brilliant masterpiece. George?
I have to confess, I've never seen Silence.
Alex, it sounds like you haven't seen it. You're just sort of...
I have seen it. I actually watched it on an airplane once and once at home. But I just have a harder time with identifying with a protagonist that is engaged in any kind of evangelism or imperialism.
But I mean, like, there's a journey for that protagonist.
Sure. I'm just not that sympathetic to the journey.
All right. I think it's one of the best films that he's made.
It was a well-crafted film, by all means. I'm just saying, for me personally.
But I mean, like, it really hit home to me about the nature of faith, and in a more visceral way than even Last Temptation. And I think it really worked on multiple levels outside of the craft. And I mean, like, it was almost like a more adult film, as adult as like there's something really mature and well thought out, deep about Silence that I hadn't experienced in many movies in the last 10 years at all, and certainly not in a lot of Scorsese movies. It's a top 5 Scorsese for me. I think it's really, really special. I was dreading seeing it because the trailer looks so boring, and maybe that's why George didn't see it.
I'll also confess I don't have the highest opinion of the 2 lead actors.
I don't either. Like, Adam Driver is my least favorite. He's actually in it far less. Andrew Garfield I'm actually okay with, and I actually thought he was quite strong.
It's an interesting point that I know you significantly and several other members did not enjoy First Reformed, and I did, whereas you guys enjoyed this.
George is the other one that didn't, and I'm gonna give you a chance to talk about that momentarily.
Moonlight's a lesson, and you can have a rushed schedule and not allow your AC to get good marks and still make an award-winning film, even if 2/3 of it are out of focus.
Yeah. Alex knows I agree with that. We sometimes make fun of Moonlight in that regard. Yeah, that's one of the films on the list that I do not like. It's not just my tastes involved here, but yes, I don't like the look of Moonlight. Anything else on this list before we move on?
Let's move on.
Next up, you guys are always curious about what I voted on for the Indie Spirit Awards. I'm often talking about how I, am a voter for the Indie Spirit Awards and go to the screenings, and I blog about it sometimes. And so here are my votes. I'm not going to read them all off to you. You guys can see them on the screen, and it looks like 13 different categories. I do want to point out, several of my votes went to a film called The Tale, which was not eligible for Oscars, but it was eligible for the Spirit Awards. And I voted for it for Best Editing, First Screenplay, First Feature. It's an extraordinary film, but after HBO picked it up, it was not eligible for Oscars anymore. It's more of an Emmy thing, but it was eligible here, and I couldn't deny that it was the best in those categories. And I guess the other one I want to point out is Private Life. I voted for it in several categories, and that was one of the films that made my top 10. I have Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actress. My Best Picture winner was You Were Never Really Here, which didn't make my top 10. A Private Life wasn't nominated in that category. You Were Never Really Here is probably my 13th favorite film of the year. Didn't crack the top 10, but I liked it very much. Minor quibbles with it that kept it off the top 10. And I don't think George saw You Were Never Really Here.
I did not. I remember hearing very bad things about it, actually.
That's interesting.
I did tell you there was another movie starring Joaquin Phoenix that I loved very much. And
your number 4 film, Don't Worry, They Won't Get Far on Foot. Or He Won't Get Far on Foot, I think it is. As you might expect, almost none of the things that I voted for won, except Glenn Close for The Wife. And then, of course, the surprise that she didn't actually win the Oscar, which we'll get to momentarily. Alex, anything on these votes? You didn't see many of the films, I think, right?
No, I haven't even heard of The Tale. You lent me the disc for Private Life, so I need to finally watch that.
It's also on Netflix, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, seeing how much you voted for Private Life and The Tale makes me really want to see both of them.
Oh, that's kind of sweet, even though we disagree about First and Foremost. George, anything on these votes?
not really. Not familiar enough with enough of the movies to comment. So
I'm surprised, George. You usually get around to
especially to independent type films. Because last year was just one of these years in which I did not have a lot of free time, and I missed a lot of movies. I'm very sorry to have not seen Private Life. I heard really great things about it. I believe I can watch it on Netflix, can I?
You can watch it on Netflix.
Yeah, no excuse for that one. I apologize.
Yeah, you should apologize. Now we've done some top 10 stuff. We're going to answer some questions about the Oscar preview that we did. And neither of these guys were on that particular episode. That was Ryan and Jim. We had a bad year as far as the Oscar preview is concerned. Try to predict 9 categories every year. In 2017, I was 9 for 9. I was 8 for 9 in 2016, only missing Best Picture with the Moonlight La La Land fiasco. This year, Jim and Ryan were both 4 out of 9, and I only got 5 out of 9. I'm embarrassed. We all missed original screenplay. We picked The Favorite, and Green Book won. We all missed Best Actress. We all picked Glenn Close, and Olivia Colman won. And we all missed Best Picture. We all picked Roma, and Green Book won. Other ones that we missed, Jim and Ryan missed Best Director. They thought Spike Lee would win, but I got that one right. Jim missed Adapted Screenplay. He thought If Beale Street Could Talk would win, but Ryan and I both predicted BlacKkKlansman. Ryan missed Best Actor. He said Christian Bale was going to beat Rami Malek, but I knew he was wrong there. And I missed Best Cinematography. I thought they wouldn't want to give too many awards to Cuarón, so I thought they would give cinematography to Cold War, and I was wrong about that. Interestingly, Ryan got 5 should wins. The films that he thought should win did win in 5 different categories. And for me, my preferred Best Picture did wind up winning, so that was a small consolation for the poor predictions. In the craft categories, I only attempted 8 other craft categories. I did that by myself, and I only got 4 of those right. A really off year for me for a total of 9 correct out of 17 nominations. I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that it's not a trend. George, are you super disappointed in me?
No. I mean, it was a very tough year. I think everybody was hit with a lot of surprises, including some of the winners. So, you can let yourself off the hook for that one.
Thanks, George. Alex threw something at me at the Oscar party.
What did I throw at you?
No, I'm just joking.
Oh,
drink, a glass, knives.
What? Well, that sounds like me. The zeitgeist of Hollywood is pretty fickle and fluid and elusive. But that's the reason there's constant new movies.
That many wrong, like a long time. Like possibly 1988 might have been the last time I got that many wrong.
Well, I would argue that the current tastes of the culture in 2019 aren't very good.
Well, well, let's open that can of worms. This is your moment here, because George and I, through the top 10 and Oscar preview, have already opined on 2018, but you have not. So inquiring minds of the audience want to know, your favorite film of 2018, which I believe was Ryan's favorite screenplay of the year. Should I guess what I think it is?
Sure.
Death of Stalin, your favorite film of 2018?
Yes. I significantly enjoyed it on all levels. The exact kind of movie I like to watch and would love to make. I recognize that I have a unique perspective and sensibility that's what appeals to me.
I liked it very much. It didn't make my top 10, but I saw 100 and whatever it was, 112, 13 movies.
Yeah.
I did enjoy it. They made my top 5 screenplays of the year, adapted screenplays. George, what do you think of that film?
I loved its screenplay, and I did like the movie. I appreciated it tremendously, but I felt the director never really found a tone for it.
I disagree with that. It's a tricky tone, but this is the creator of Veep, you know what I mean? And I feel like it had a very similar tone to Veep. So
or The Office.
But some of them had English accents, and some of them attempted Russian accents, and some of them sounded like they were still American accents. And I found that in a movie that was supposed to be about a particular group of people from a particular place, a little uneven. To be entirely fair, it was the second time I watched the movie that it really stuck out to me. So I did see it a second time. I liked it enough for that.
Yeah, I'll be honest, like, it makes sense now that you mention it, but it's something that normally I would be very attuned to, but it didn't occur to me. It didn't bump for me. I was having so much fun that it didn't.
Well, and understandably, because it was fun. The high wire walk between the, oh my God, this is horrifying, and oh my God, this is hilarious, was basically very well balanced. So
That's what I liked about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend too much time on it because we have a limited amount of time, but you do have a disagreement with George and me. But your number 2 film, as I recall, was First Reformed, and George and I were both down on it.
I thoroughly enjoyed it and thought it was a really incredible meditation on faith, community, connectedness, and just all sorts of stuff. I've always been a Paul Schrader fan, and it seemed like a continuation of what he's been doing, and that he has not altered himself to placate audiences.
For me, I just felt like it jumped the shark 2/3 of the way through. And I also felt like it was poorly directed. I had a lot of issues with the design, and the lighting was a little too sparse. I like Ethan Hawke. I didn't actually think it was that good a performance. I think he was a little too much. And I didn't think Amanda Seyfried was very good. And I felt like the environmental aspect was heavy-handed. So I had a lot of issues with this movie. I really didn't like it at all. George?
Well, I have to say, I love Ethan Hawke, and I did think he was very good in the movie, especially considering what he had to work with. I love films about crisis of faith. I have usually liked Paul Schrader's movies very, very much. I just thought this was an excruciating experience. It was completely uninvolving. I kept looking for something, wanting to be brought into it. I agree it wasn't well directed. It was like I was watching everything from a distance. Nothing pulled me in. It seemed to just get less and less tangible as it went along. And I was shocked. It was something I really expected to like. I did not like that. Sorry to say.
But speaking of Paul Schrader, our last classic was Last Temptation of Christ, which he wrote the screenplay for, bringing it full circle. So Paul Schrader is very much part of this set of episodes.
I wonder if a different director would have made a much better movie out of First Reformed.
I feel like Paul Schrader was so close to Ethan Hawke's character, and it was so specific and like myopic and dived in on it. I see what you mean about not being able to relate to it. It had a bunch of very specific things that related to me and my own like personal experience in life that I connected to. But I think an outside director might have been like, okay, well, I didn't write this. I didn't make up these characters. How do I find a way to make it accessible to me? And that would make it more accessible to you guys in the audience. I thoroughly enjoyed it and felt deeply connected to it.
I wanted to talk about it because I wanted to show that different perspective, because on the top 10, George and I piled on it. All right, so guys, now we're going to talk about some things related to the 1988 in review. So that's kind of exciting. And the big question that always comes up, regarding when we study a year, because all that we talk about in 1988 in review is we talk about our favorite films. And George, these are the same questions that you had to answer last year regards 1942. So the question for Alex now is, and I'll answer as well afterwards. Alex, out of all the 1988 films you saw, I think you saw 40, 41, 42. What is the worst 1988 film that you saw?
Working Girl?
Working Girl. He goes for a Best Picture nominee. I had a feeling you were going to go there, which played at TCM Fest. The only 88 representative at TCM Fest this year. I don't hate it as much as you do, but I think it's hilarious when you make fun of it. It always makes me laugh. It's not good to me. George, can you defend Working Girl?
Nah, it was okay. I mean, I remember at the time thinking, why is this being so fussed over? Not that I thought it was a bad movie.
It sounds like you're the nicest out of all of us. I mean, it sounds like Alex gives it an F. I give it like maybe a C minus, D plus, and you're maybe like C plus area.
Yeah.
But none of us really feel like it's a good movie. I think
it's not a good movie, and I would not want to spend 1 minute with a single character in the film.
All right, so now it's my turn for the worst film of 1988 to share with you guys. Miley's favorite. I don't think Alex saw this, and I wouldn't wish it on you. Worst film I saw out of all the 80 films I saw in 1988. It's called Johnny Be Good, in which Anthony Michael Hall plays a highly regarded high school football QB recruit who's being courted by colleges all over the country. Yes, Breakfast Club fans, the nerd is now the jock. And Paul Gleason is actually his high school coach of the film, further muddying those Breakfast Club waters. Robert Downey Jr. plays his wild best friend, and Uma Thurman makes her film debut as his girlfriend right before she made Dangerous Liaisons later that year. It takes what could have been an insightful exploration of the college recruitment process, think Spike Lee's He Got Game, and turns it into one big joke. The film had no life at all, and its tone was all over the place. At times, it had a very dry comic approach, and at others, it was very broad and Caddyshack-like. Downey Jr. was energetic, but way out of control. He needed a director to rein him in. The rest of the characterizations were very one note, including, worst of all, Johnny himself, Anthony Michael Hall. It's a poorly scripted role, performed even worse. He doesn't seem to have any real belief system, so I don't care what colleges he chooses. I don't believe a word the character says, and neither does Hall. His blasé attitude towards recruitment was refreshing at first, but as it turns out, he has that attitude about everything. And if he doesn't care, why should we? The worst film I saw this year, Johnny Be Good. I couldn't believe how bad this was. George, I don't suppose you ever took the time to watch this.
No, I did not see Johnny Be Good, no. And I did see a lot of movies that were released in 1988.
Alex, there's no way you bothered with that out of the 40.
I didn't watch it this past year, but I have seen it before.
Oh, was that so fascinating? Am I being too mean?
No. Oh, you want me to believe that everybody's treating the shrimpy redhead this way? No way. Like, that's where my suspension of disbelief breaks.
Got it. Yeah, and you would know.
Being that demographic, that's not what the world's like for us. It's like if you took a role written for James Van, if you just had a black guy playing Dawson on Dawson's Creek, be like, this feels a little off. Or like not written for the actor.
That and beyond that, just the execution was all off. Now it's another fun question that George also had to answer last year, and this is for Alex. Out of all the films from 1988, or actors really, who was the? Oh, I should change this behind me too. We don't need Johnny Be Good up here anymore. These questions are more questions related to 1988. So the question is, out of all the films we saw, who were the hottest man and woman you saw in all the films from 1988? Most attractive man and woman that you saw in the films from 1988. Alex, the hottest man and then the hottest woman.
I'm going to go with Bruce Willis and Die Hard for the hottest guy.
Bruce Willis and Die Hard. You like the receding hairline.
Yeah. That's what good-looking guys look like.
I can see where you go. That I went with Kevin Costner in Bull Durham. He is very appealing, and we all like that film. Out of all the guys, I think he is best looking as far as I'm concerned. George, I don't suppose you have an opinion on any of these, do you?
The best looking man and woman from 1988? Well,
or just Bruce Willis and Kevin Costner?
Bruce Willis or Kevin Costner? Kevin Costner.
Thank you. I win that battle. All right, Alex.
Okay. Are you talking in terms of a relationship or just like a night?
I mean, I'm talking about the spirit traction, found appealing, hottest woman that you saw, or most best looking woman in all the films.
For me,
Mm-hmm.
I would say Lena Olin and The Unbearable Lightness of Being.
I knew you were going to go there. I should just predict all of your answers. I knew you were going to get. Yeah, she's super hot.
Great.
She's gorgeous. Definitely considered her, but I went in a different direction. I saw this actress in 2 movies. I actually think this actress is one of the most stunning actresses ever. A big year for her in 1988. And Michelle Pfeiffer is.
I knew you were going to say her.
Because not only does she look gorgeous in Dangerous Liaisons, she's also in Tequila Sunrise in 1988. And I mean, she's just breathtaking, and she looks different in both movies, but still gorgeous. I've often said if you added up attractiveness points and talent points and you added it all together, she might, certainly in my lifetime, she might have the highest score if that were like a thing. She has the best combination of looks and ability and actors that have been working since I've been alive. In the old days, there's definitely Vivian Leigh would be a consideration, and some others, but Michelle Pfeiffer, at least in the 80s and 90s, was right there. George, you predicted what I was going to say.
Yeah, I thought so because I knew how much you liked Dangerous Liaisons. I didn't know if you'd seen Tequila Sunrise, but one thing I said this when I saw Tequila Sunrise, which is an entertaining movie that kind of falls apart long before it ends.
I like the script, though.
It does feature the 6 bluest eyes ever put in the same film. Mel Gibson,
Michelle Pfeiffer, Kurt Russell.
It's kind of amazing looking at those eyes through that movie.
It's Conrad Hall cinematography, so it's like very lush, and he emphasizes their looks.
He went to town, yeah. And she is beautiful. I agree with you.
Okay, so this question could go to either of you because George watched it. The question is, the audience is curious, Alex, out of all the factoids that I mentioned in the early part of the show, what one stands out the most? What do you remember out of all the random 1988 facts that I mentioned?
I mean, the main thing that jumps to mind is the presidential election.
That's something. Previous years, they forgot everything altogether. I think George last year couldn't remember a damn thing. George, do you remember anything from our 88 review in terms of factoids? It's fine.
Rob Lowe at the Oscars.
Oh, yeah. And I saw that. I remember that vividly. Nobody could believe how awful it was. My God.
As bad as advertised.
Yes,
really
was. Yes, can't argue with that.
One more bit about 98 before we do. George, do you have anything you would say to Alex about the show and your thoughts on it?
I thought the conversations were all really entertaining. Your differences of opinion were all really well advocated. You knew. No, I thought it was a very good. I enjoyed it very much.
See, Alex,
it does. Good. Thank you for watching.
Yeah.
But Alex did not watch your top 10, so
this is the way I'm treated in this life, I guess.
And he's not even a redhead. All right, one other thing that we like to do.
I'm a metaphorical redheaded cousin.
Exactly. We like to talk about crossovers. Our audiences like it. When we talk crossovers between the years that we studied, and we didn't have time for it in the actual 1988 review. And so far, we've studied films from 1942, 1966, 1988, and 1990, all even years, strangely enough. Now, obviously, there's a ton of crossover between 88 and 90, so we won't bother with that. And there's not bound to be much crossover between 1988 and 1942, but I did find one, which I'll get to. So we're going to focus on crossover between 1988 and 1966. Which I think will be kind of fun. Starting with directors. And, the very controversial director Roman Polanski directed the film Frantic in 1988. And in 1966, one of his earlier works, a film called Cul-de-sac with Lionel Stander and Donald Pleasance. Another director that worked in both years, Francis Ford Coppola, did Tucker, the Man in His Dream in 1988. And one of his early films, You're a Big Boy Now, is in 1966. George Roy Hill directed one of my favorite films from 1966, the very controversial film Hawaii that I got made fun of for liking so much. But in 1988, he was still working, and he had a very odd choice of film. He did the film Funny Farm with Chevy Chase, one of his last films. I was surprised to learn that George Roy Hill directed that. Robert Redford is sort of a crossover in the sense that in 1988, he directed his second film, The Milagro Beanfield War. But in 1966 film, he was an actor in both The Chase and This Property is Condemned. His final film, supposedly as an actor, came out this past year, 2018, The Old Man and the Gun. And the last director I want to talk about is Mike Nichols, who directed both Biloxi Blues and Working Girl in 1988. And in 1966, he did Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And for 1966, we all named him as the director who should have won the Oscar that year instead of Fred Zinnemann. Actors that were in both years, 1988 and 1966. So we're going to start with James Caan, who was, of course, in Alien Nation in 1988, the film before it was a TV show. And in 1966, one of his earliest roles for Howard Hawks in the Western El Dorado, where James Caan gets to star with John Wayne and Robert Mitchum. Shirley MacLaine, of course, in 1988 won a Golden Globe for her work in Madame Suzatska, and in 1966, she was in the film Gambit. Speaking of Gambit, her co-star, Michael Caine, was in a film from 1988. He was in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, of course, Gambit, and he was Oscar nominated in 1966 for his work in Alfie. I also want to talk about Max von Sydow and Gene Hackman. Both were Best Actor nominees in 1988, and they were co-stars in the 1966 film Hawaii that I talked about just a minute ago. Von Sydow nominated 1988 for Pele the Conqueror, and Gene Hackman nominated for Mississippi Burning. The one 1942 connection, I had forgotten about this until I realized it. Robert Stack was in To Be or Not to Be in 1942. It was Jim's #1 film of 1942, but he was also in Caddyshack 2 in 1988. So he did manage to do both films, and he's the best thing about Caddyshack 2, incidentally. Robert Stack is the only one that manages to be in both 42 and 88. You were part of the 42 in review, George. Did you see that coming?
Had no idea.
But you're also a big fan of To Be or Not to Be, as I recall.
Very big fan of it.
Alex, anything on those crossovers?
I just feel like how much I've heard you talk about Hawaii with me and other people and my dad. Like, I need to see it.
I don't recall Hawaii ever being a controversial film. Maybe it's just controversial because of the
It
way
was
people.
controversial because everyone made fun of me for liking it.
Yeah, very successful film in its time.
It was the highest grossing film of second highest grossing film of 1966 behind The Bible, directed by John Huston.
You can't mess with the Bible.
Can't mess with the Bible. But yeah, no, it was an epic film, and it was so successful because Julie Andrews was in it. It was the height of her popularity.
That novel was enormously, that was the height of James Michener's popularity, and that was one of those pocket books that were all over the place.
I'm reading the novel now, actually, because I like the movie so much. So it's time to move on. Done with the tweet beat, and hopefully this thing will work, and we'll see what's going on, because Alex is going to be on display here. It's going to be Alex's segment, and it is, we call it the second run, Society's second run. And the basic explanation for this is whenever a movie comes up in conversation that one of us hasn't seen, they have to go see it, and they come back and they review it. So Alex, there's a bunch of films that came up in the 1980 review that Alex had not seen yet or did not get a chance to see. And so he chose one to go back and revisit. Alex, what is your second run movie going to be?
My second run movie is Punchline.
Punchline is the movie that I said should have been nominated for Best Actor for Tom Hanks, Best Actress for Sally Field. Devin also liked it, so it came up a couple times on the 1980 review. So I'm curious to see what Alex thinks about it and see if I can find a poster for it to be my background here. Alex, what did you think of the movie?
I really enjoyed it. I would compare this with Funny People, the Adam Sandler movie.
No, I hate the movie.
It's kind of like the Hollywood actor version of the stand-up comedy world, as much as it's understood. Like, it kind of captured it, but there's a bunch of little things. As I hang out in the stand-up comedy scene a lot here in Los Angeles, and I wasn't around in the 80s in New York, so I can't really speak to it, but there's certain things that seemed a little off, but just in the context of the world built in the movie, it worked and it was good. I liked it.
Okay, cool. For me, I could say it was the discovery of the project for me, because a lot of my other films that I talked about a lot were films that I had seen before. Punchline was the one that surprised me. That was the one I was like, I almost didn't watch it. I didn't watch it because it was free on Amazon, and I did, and you know, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's this kind of movie. It was a character-driven, actor-driven movie with some great performances. Feels real without the histrionics of handheld camera.
They let the acting and cinematography speak for itself rather than showing insecurity by over-stylizing it. And that's something I always appreciate.
There's no nuance.
There's a Singing in the Rain reference scene that Tom Hanks does that is just intensely and beautifully done.
So
and
good.
It's just without dialogue, one of the best statements on the loneliness of being a performer or creative person.
I love that point. George, I don't suppose you've seen Punchline.
So long ago, I did like the movie very much. I couldn't comment on it. I don't remember.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what this movie was going to be, which one he was going to choose. I'm glad he chose one of the ones that I really liked a lot, and it may come up again. All right, it's time to move on, guys. We're going to do the final segment of the evening, and it's time for the top 5. We're going to do top 5 films from 1988. I know it says JB's top 5 from films from 1988, but Alex watched a bunch too, so he's going to join me and do his own top 5, and we'll compare and contrast. Those of you that watch the show probably know some of the films that are going to come up. You probably know what our number 1 and 2s are, but the other ones are also going to be worthwhile. So it'll be fun to see how the order shakes out. So we'll start with Alex and his number 5 film. What's your number 5 film in 1988?
Willow. I know you didn't feel like it held up as much, but that's such a formative movie for me and is just all these elements that I love as a fantasy nerd and everything.
You know, I didn't think that would come up. I should have predicted that, though. You did talk about it a lot. Willow, I was so looking forward to it, and I watched it in June. It's been a while, but I revisited my notes not too long ago. The direction is really assured is one note that I wrote. Felt like one of those childhood movies that just didn't connect in the same way.
Yeah, you're also watching all these really high-minded movies like sandwiched around it.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit made my top 10. I don't know
sure.
the factor. I was disappointed. I watched it with some other people. One person left the room. They were like, I'm out. It wasn't that bad, but it started to really get its energy when Val Kilmer showed up. The first hour was awkward.
You watched
George, you remember Hello?
Remember exactly when and where I saw it. It didn't really do very much for me.
I used to watch it all the time as a kid. Rewatch it was a very exciting thing. It was around my birthday, actually. It was a disappointment. It didn't have the life that I remembered it having. And there were so many great films from 1988. It didn't connect. Okay, so my number 5. Hopefully we won't need to talk too much about Alex, because my number 5 is Punchline. Did sneak in there at number 5, just knocking off Bull Durham, which was number 5 before seeing Punchline. My kind of movie. I talked about on the show both performances. Tom Hanks and Sally Field build vivid, thorough characters. Both make so many strong choices. I mentioned Robert Downey Jr. earlier in Johnny Be Good, and I think Tom Hanks's performance is a good counterpoint to that. He's completely in control, playing out of control. It's amazing to watch. And to that end, the direction by David Seltzer is surprisingly assured. It has to be with the scene work that is that strong. He establishes the world beautifully and tells the story with precision and detail. Everything you'd want from such a personal movie. If I have any complaint, I would say the jokes aren't that strong, but they aren't groaners either. If I were a one-man nominating committee for the Oscars, I would have nominated it for Best Picture, obviously, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Original Screenplay. 4 nominations. So we've already talked about Punchline, so I don't think we need to rehash it. Guys, do you have anything you need to add, or we can move on?
No, I'll just say I agree with you about the stand-up, that it wasn't the actual stand-up in the movie isn't the best material, but I feel like that was partially intentional.
Certainly for part of the movie, but I mean, like, there's part of the movie where I think it was supposed to be like rip-roaring.
There's moments where I would compare Sally Field's character with like Marvelous Miss Maisel, which is on Amazon now, and like she's supposed to be like killing the room, and I'm like, I don't think this would kill. Like, it felt a little disingenuous, but
I'll say this, it wasn't killing me. I still bought that she was doing well. That's still translated, and it didn't feel implausible.
I bought it, but if I was one of the judges in the stand-up contest, I wouldn't have voted for it.
That is my feeling as well. But I mean, I think that's the point of the movie, because I think everyone agreed that Tom Hanks was the best, but they had an axe to grind with him to some degree because he burned so many bridges, like that was part of it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
George, you have anything else to add? You don't remember it?
Maybe what you're talking about, the stand-up comedy scene is not working as well. Maybe that has something to do with why the film was not particularly well received in that time period. There was a lot of fanfare about its release, but it was a bit of a disappointment critically and financially, I believe. Let's
move on to number 4. And it sounds like we're going to have an argument about this one, at least as far as mine is concerned. But Alex, I will let you go first here.
My number 4 will be quick. It is also Punchline.
Oh, it made your top 5! Yay! And the poster's already here. This is exciting.
And you've heard why I like it.
Right now.
I felt like there's the things where Clean and Sober with Michael Keaton could have used some improvement. Punchline managed to capture in a better narrative.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it. So, George, you want to go back and rewatch it?
Actually, I would.
All right. My number 4 is this film that Alex on the show, and I don't remember if it was on camera or off, but he made some derisive comments about it, even though it's sort of a famous film. And so it's celebrating 30th anniversary. Die Hard is my number 4 film of 1988. And I got to see it in the theaters. TCM re-released it in November, I think it was. It's been a long-time favorite, and also for many of my generation. I will admit, watching it again on the big screen, it wasn't as amazing as I remembered, but still so great and so much better than a lot of the films from 1988 that we saw. It's a little slower than I remembered and has some awkward story beats, like, for example, the limo driver didn't seem to land with me this time. But the editing and the direction are super taut, way ahead of its time. Each cut pushes the story forward, and as a great action movie needs to do, and so few do, it keeps you constantly aware of off-screen space, putting you in the middle of Nakatomi Tower with Willis, who Alex finds very attractive. Much has been made of Alan Rickman's outstanding performance, but I have to acknowledge that Bruce Willis is pretty great in his own right. It's not scenery chewing, but it's a complete character. He feels like a real-life guy in an extreme situation. And also, I think people forget how funny the film is. The script is all around great. Lots of detail and innovation, particularly with how John deals with his foes. Even though some of the warts stood out to me at this viewing, it perhaps unintentionally revolutionized the action movie with copycats to come for years after. If I were a one-man nominating committee, I would give it 6 nominations, including obviously Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor for Rickman, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Editing, and Best Visual Effects. Die Hard. Alex, is your chance to take it down.
I like Die Hard.
Did you? What did you say about it that was so mean on the show? Or
I might have
was it
made
off
some
camera?
joke about Alan Rickman's character. Like, Alan Rickman does a good job with the page, but like the premise of his character is ridiculous.
Okay, maybe
in
that's
like a
what it
global
was.
socio-political sense.
George.
Die Hard was pretty much as you describe it, JB. Tremendous fun. I haven't seen it since back then. It was very funny. It has a great sense of humor. It is really suspenseful. Bruce Willis's persona is put to good use. He's, that was his.
It wasn't fully created yet. You know what I mean? Like, it was like an early movie for him. He's still on Moonlighting.
Yeah, I think it was the first movie he did while he was on Moonlighting, wasn't it?
He was in a movie called Sunset, in which he played Tom Mix.
Yes, I never saw that Blake Edwards movie with him and
Yeah, Blake Edwards movie, James Garner playing Wyatt Earp, and they solved crime together in Hollywood.
I never saw that. Die Hard is a blast. And Alan,
and it doesn't have like major depth, but for an action movie to make my top 5 like this, it has to be pretty special. And Die Hard has certainly stayed the test of time. So number 3 is coming up, and my final 3 will probably be predictable. I'm pretty sure I know Alex's 1 and 2. Should I guess your 3?
Sure.
Is it Pele the Conqueror?
It is.
Oh yeah!
You know me so well.
I do. I'm excited. Tell me about Pele the Conqueror.
I thought this was such an incredible exploration of antebellum Sweden at a time of incredible turmoil in that part of the world that had a huge impact on the rest of the world, but was largely unseen and is still like misunderstood. Basically, when all opportunity and your land just goes bad and you're a farmer in central Sweden during this famine around the turn of the 20th century, you just had to go somewhere else. Where you ended up and whether or not people treated you well there was really the luck of the draw. And this film's an exploration of Max von Sydow and his son going through that with this essentially plantation home they go to on an island off the coast of Denmark, where they do not like them for being Swedes. But it was incredible performances, beautiful cinematography, masterful costume design, great production design. They found the perfect location for it. I was just caught up in the whole thing and enjoyed it.
It is very much an Alex kind of movie as well. As I sort of intimated on the show, I like the movie, but I didn't connect with it on that deep a level. If I had quibbles with it, I would say it's a little slow and maybe sprawling. Like, I feel like it maybe tries to cover too much ground. I mean, trying to adapt a novel, that happens sometimes. And so, I feel like nothing landed for me because it kept jumping time in major ways, and characters would go in and out. It almost felt like it maybe would have been served like by a miniseries or something like that.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. And like the time jumping where you have actors that don't look actively like they've been aged makes it hard to buy in, especially like a kid at that age. If he was it's like his life over 2 years, and an 8-year-old versus a 10-year-old looks there's a bunch of growth spurts there. Very
true. Some beautiful moments though. I didn't like the cinematography as much as you did. You liked the sort of bleakness of it. I thought it was kind of a flat and didn't appeal to me as much. George, do you remember Pele the Conqueror?
I do. I remember liking it very much. I have not seen it since then, and that's now 31 years. My God.
But they showed it at Film Forum a couple years ago.
No, but I did not see it then. I liked it, though, very, very much.
Cool. Do you want to try and guess my number 3? Either of you, do you remember the show well enough?
The 2 that I'm remembering from you, I think, are going to be 1 and 2. So I can't think of what number.
Yeah, I know what one of the 2 that you have left is.
I'll guess. Midnight Run?
Okay. Midnight Run, no, did not make the top 5. It is a film that you asked me about, though, George. It's a film that you said you are not a big fan of, and it was my first time seeing it. It was a restoration. Come on down, Wings of Desire by director Wim Wenders. It's my number 3 in the 1980 review is the film that should have been nominated for Best Picture, because my 1 and 2 were both nominated for Best Picture. With all the great storytelling I've talked about, maybe what 1988 needed was this slightly esoteric and highly existential film. This extremely evocative, emotional, and beautiful film wanders through its first 3 quarters before you realize you're in the middle of a very specific narrative. I mean, talk about disguising your structure. The black and white cinematography was rich and textured, and when they switched to color, it was bold and vivid, offering a stark contrast The score was moody and even dissonant in points, but wholly unique and highly effective. In spite of its many dark moments, it's ultimately a hopeful film. Love can conquer all in its own unique way, and that human connection gives us all something to live and die for. If I were a one-man nominating committee, I'd give it 6 nominations, including Best Picture, obviously, Best Supporting Actress for Solveig Martin, Best Foreign Language Film, Best Cinematography, Best Score, and Best Visual Effects. I know that Alex has not seen Wings of Desire. George, you said to me privately that you're not a fan.
No, I didn't like the movie at all. I thought it was so boring. It just didn't do it for me for a second. I've got to be honest with you.
Wow, we're aligned quite frequently. So this is a pretty stark.
And I'm going to pay tribute to you there. You're liking it this much, and the fact that it does have the reputation it has makes me think maybe I should see it at another time and give it another chance.
Definitely see the restored version. I mean, it's stunning. For what it's worth, Nick went with me, and he also loved it. He's been talking about it ever since as well. It's interesting that he didn't like it, especially like. I feel like the Peter Falk stuff would be something you didn't like.
I do like Peter Falk. I like Bruno Ganz. I like Peter Falk. I did not like the movie.
I do think it's an Alex kind of movie.
Okay, well, I'll check it out.
Okay, so Alex, we're going to move on to number 2. And do you want me to guess this one?
Sure.
You got Dangerous Liaisons at number 2.
No.
Unbearable Lightness.
Unbearable Lightness of Being with Lena Olin and Daniel Day-Lewis is number 2.
I thought on the show you said that was your favorite of the year, but
I found it so impactful, beautiful performances, and Sven Nykvist's cinematography just blew me away. I love the movie, and I recommend it to folks that seem to agree with things I say I like.
Just them, though.
I'm not going to say that I think everybody would like this film, because I don't think it's a film for everybody.
The novel itself is a very hard adaptation, which is why I give director Philip Kaufman so much credit. And I like a lot of things you like about it. I think it should have been nominated for Best Director. I didn't have it in my top 5, so I didn't have it as the Best Picture nominee, but Best Director, Best Supporting Actress for Lena Olin, I had Best Cinematography, we talked about, and Best Adapted Screenplay I had as well. So, I mean, I definitely think it is among the best of the year. I think I may have had it like somewhere in the 11 or 12 range in my top 10. It's very, very good. And I think George likes it as well.
Very much.
We all watched it together. It was Devin and Alex's first time, and we all watched it at Devin's house one night. I think it was Super Bowl Sunday even. I could tell that they were really like engrossed. It was kind of special to me for introducing them to it. It was kind of cool. All right, so Alex, you can probably guess what my number 2 is at this point.
Well, didn't you say your number 2 was The Wings of Desire?
That's my number 3.
Is your number 2 Dangerous Liaisons?
Nope.
Oh, Mississippi Burning.
Mississippi Burning is my number 2. I don't think it should have won Best Picture, and you'll see why momentarily. But it is on my top 100 of all time. It's number 53 on my top 100 of all time. The film is polished and precise without ever feeling false. The scene work is outstanding, carefully blocked and executed. Hardly a missed note in the movie, save for the 2 shots that bookend the movie. That's the only real bump for me. Everything else felt realistic, even when it's abhorrent. The racism is vivid and painful. The world created is very thorough. Great job by director Alan Parker. It's a riveting movie, and in other years, it might be the best of the year, but not this year. If I were a one-man nominating committee, I'd have it nominated in 4 categories: Best Picture, Best Actor for Gene Hackman, Best Screenplay, and Best Editing. It won Best Cinematography. I didn't have it in my top 5 cinematography. Looked good, but not good enough. Not my top 5 for cinematography, but film means a lot to me. I enjoy it very much. And Alex, we saw it together. You were a fan, as I recall.
I did. I really liked it. Punchline and Willow ended up knocking it off my list. It was on it originally for top 5. I thought it was great. I don't really have anything big and negative to say about it. Thought the performances and scripts were all wonderful. I really liked the cinematography too. I guess why I felt like Willow and Punchline more individually resonated with me.
I get that, and I mean Mississippi Burning. I mean, for all like the message movies, like Mississippi Burning maintained its focus on character, and that really hit home for me.
And I think that's good. I also feel like being from the South, when I see movies like this, I'm like, oh, it's good this story's getting told and out there. But it's like, sometimes I find it harder to relate and fully plug in, just because like I know a number of people who have had crosses burned on their lawns and things like that. The movie's about an awful thing that's happened to somebody that I care about. I tend to have a harder time celebrating it.
Understood. Yeah. George, I don't think I know your opinion about Mississippi Burning.
That's quite a statement, Alex. I really liked Mississippi Burning very, very much. It was one of the best movies of the year. I think everyone I knew felt very strongly about it. And I love Gene Hackman. He has given a lot of great performances, but this was really an extraordinary one, I thought. So
I don't know if you remember this from the show, but Devin felt like Willem Dafoe should have been nominated over Gene Hackman for this movie. Thoughts?
Huh.
Well, that's because Devin would have played the Willem Dafoe role if he were cast in this film.
You said that on the show.
That would actually probably turn him away from liking Willem Dafoe. No, Willem Dafoe was very good in it, but I really thought this was Gene's
He literally brought the house down.
Okay. All right. Jokes aside, it's time for number ones, and it sounds like we're going to have the Alex and I are going to have the same number one film of the year. Alex, would you like to announce it?
Yes, Dangerous Liaisons.
Dangerous Liaisons for both of us. My number 4 favorite film of all time. Come on, there it is. It's a wrinkled version of it, but it's still there. Intelligent, deep, bitingly funny, highly entertaining, and surprisingly moving. It's everything to me. This is a movie not just about sexual dynamics, but also sexual power and how these affairs to the heart, these things that make us human, have an inexplicable, almost self-destructive effect on our lives. Ultimately, then, when the film really becomes about is vanity and narcissism, but in a much broader existential sense. This is why it begins and ends with a mirror. It is our vanity in all of us that drives us in so many decisions. It's less about who we are, but how we are perceived and how we think we have to invent ourselves to achieve our goals, sexual or otherwise. If I were a one-man nominating committee, and I usually like to spread things out, I would nominate this in 12 categories. It was only nominated in 7. I have it for Best Picture, Best Actor Malkovich, Best Actress Close, Best Supporting Actress Pfeiffer, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Cinematography, Editing, Production Design, Costume Design, Makeup, and Score. I can't believe the makeup wasn't nominated. I actually have it winning in 7 in those categories. And for a guy that likes to spread the wealth generally, that's a big statement. I think it's a masterpiece. Alex, so excited that you also like it.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I spent a few years researching to write a script in a similar time period in some similar settings. So I really appreciated the attention to detail. Like everything you said is, it could have been like a well-written, well-acted movie that was just like good, but didn't do the work to get the world accurate and immersive, but they did. And I feel like we'd be remiss not to talk about the production design, costume design, fight design, prop design, all of that, and the level of ease, especially with Malkovich, so that you described him as scenery chewing in it.
In a good way.
But I'm saying he was given such good scenery to work with that really allowed him to elevate his performance to a higher level.
I actually said it was the best performance ever that was not nominated for an Oscar, which is a big statement.
There's all these little choices made by people other than Malkovich that made his choices feel even stronger. Like the kind of weapon or the kind of clothes or the kind of room that he's in.
Leave it to Alex to bring it back to the below the liners.
It just hammered his character home and created him so well.
I mean, it's a great team effort. Every element of this movie is terrific.
Well, this is one of Keanu Reeves' early films, and he's the one that kind of bumps. I will say he really put in the work in the rapier fight that he does with Malkovich at the end is impressive.
And he's in the movie so infrequently that it doesn't have an adverse impact overall for me. Like the rest of the movie is so invigorating. I know that Devin's girlfriend, once he came on, she was done with the movie, and that's unfortunate to me. And he's not good, but I don't think he's a major deterrent. I have no idea what George thinks about this movie. George?
I loved Dangerous Liaisons. I had seen it on Broadway the year before. It was really incredible. It was
with Alan Rickman bringing it back to Die Hard.
Rickman and Lindsay Duncan, yes. It doesn't feel at all like a filmed play. It is a completely cinematic adaptation. Both the playwright and the screenwriter, who may be the same person.
They're the same person, Christopher Hampton.
Yes, that's right. They adapted a novel.
You can say he's one person.
All right, that's true. He's a very multifaceted person.
He's not multi-personalities.
No. I thought it was a wonderful movie. I even remember thinking, I didn't think he has been a lot worse in a lot of other films. There's a big fuss made this year over the fact that Glenn Close has never won an Oscar, but this is the one that really should not have gotten away from her.
This is the one she would have won. I mean, Jodie Foster is very good in The Accused.
She is, but Glenn Close should have won this. She's just superb. It's a great film. And Stephen Frears should definitely have been a nominee. It's a great. I will say, this is not to contest you on this, but I always thought not to contest you on this. When I think of the most deserving of a nomination performance that was not nominated, I've always thought of.
Are you going Jimmy Stewart in Vertigo?
No, actually, because he's been nominated so many other times. Maybe I can look past that. And they were stupid enough to ignore Vertigo to begin with. So, you know, but that's just the byproduct of that. But Malcolm McDowell for A Clockwork Orange is the person I just can't believe the movie got the other nominations it got, and he somehow was not nominated. That's always been the most glaring omission for me. But to each his own.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised. I mean, I like the movie, but I'm surprised, given its subject matter, that it got as many nominations as it did. But I see your point. But I mean, Malkovich, to me, I would say is like a top 5 performance of all time, up there with like Brando and On the Waterfront. Like, that's how good I think he is. He's so unusual with his choices. No other Valmont. I saw the recent Broadway production with Liev Schreiber and Jana McTeer, and no other Valmont.
This is fascinating that you're pointing this out, because it's been revived a couple of times. No one has liked a production of that play since the original one. And the film was also, there was another version of it, Milos Forman's version of it released last year.
Meg Foley and Annette Bening.
Which is a fine movie, but it can't hold a candle to Dangerously.
So, George, I guess the question for you is, I didn't tell you this was coming, but I'm curious now that you've talked about, what is your favorite film of 1988 that you looked at that list?
Oh, this is tough. Tough. I don't know. I can tell you one that none of you have mentioned, although it did pop up on the show, that has been very
I know what you're going to say, and I don't think Alex saw it. You're going to say Running on Empty.
Yeah, that movie has always meant a lot to me. You made some interesting points about it that I wouldn't really dispute, but I think its muted tone is actually very powerful in the long run. I think this look at people who made colossal errors that have dominated their future and the lives of everyone else around them. It's a very haunting film. I also think in a year when people were being awarded for prior accomplishments, more or less, Lumet's work on that is 10 times better than Mike Nichols in Working Girl.
Devin did call him out as this should have been nominated for Best Director.
Oh my God, it's a beautifully made film. There's a scene in that movie that I think is one of the most beautifully acted scenes of all time. When
I think the birthday party scene in the movie is the best scene in the movie.
It's an excellent scene, but when Christine Lottie reunites with Stephen Hill,
with her dad, yes,
it really is the things that haven't been said for so many years and how they get in the way of what they wish they could. It's just so unnerving.
There was a handful of performances in 1988 that were great, but they were too small to really consider for when we were looking at should have been nominated. But I mean, like, he was one of them. Like, he would have been the best supporting actor, but it was just a scene, so I didn't feel right. But he's so great in that scene. I also thought, talking about Clean and Sober, M. Emmett Walsh in Clean and Sober as the sponsor was amazingly good, especially in counterpoint to Michael Keaton's sort of manic performance that Alex named the best of 1988. There were a handful of those performances throughout the year that I wanted to acknowledge, but didn't really have a place for them in the awards. Yeah, I like the film. Our main discussion was like trying to pinpoint River Phoenix because it is nominated, and it was just a little uneven to me because I'm just not sure what he's doing.
There is something emotionally raw about him that is automatically compelling.
I can see that.
But I think you're onto something. That's a quality that's innate in him. It isn't quite the same thing as skill.
As building a character. Yeah, exactly.
I have a feeling that Lumet had to work hard with him, but appreciated the strengths he had and knew how to work with them.
Okay, I'm going to close things out, guys. Who's going first for closing thoughts? George, we talked about a lot of stuff tonight. How do you feel?
I get the feeling, hearing you guys talk about 1988, you discovered a lot of it this year, and maybe not you, JB, but you certainly delved more into it this year. That was a year when I was seeing everything, so it was kind of great reliving it with you guys again.
Punchline and Wings of Desire, the two big ones that I had not seen before, that wound up really connecting with me. But Dangerous Liaisons, Mississippi Burning, Die Hard, Bull Durham have been favorites for a really long time.
Bull Durham is a really excellent commercial film. Excellent.
And I would also add, I was not a big fan of Roger Rabbit growing up, but rediscovered it through this process and did not realize how good it actually was until now I'm as an adult, and the depth and detail of the screenplay and direction. It was a lot more mature than I remembered in spite of its tone. Didn't make my top 5, but in terms of discovering things, George, it was a rediscovery in a way. But yeah, a lot of these films were new to you, Alex.
They were. I will say Roger Rabbit I watched repeatedly with my family as a kid, and it's always been one of my favorite movies. But it's been several years, so watching it again as an adult and a filmmaker, I came to appreciate it at a whole new, deeper level.
Our next set of episodes, our 55th set of episodes, is going to start on Thursday, May 23rd with the movie The Sun Is Also a Star. We will see you then. In the meantime, we are done with our 54th set of episodes. The 5th season has started, and this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.